Today we're painting this simple watercolor apple on a branch. We'll build the colors in soft layers and add a few simple details to bring the apple and leaves to life. It's a lovely project for practicing smooth color transitions and layering without making things too complicated. Let's get started. I'm starting with my pencil drawing already prepared. You can find the printable outline along with the full list of materials I'm using in the description below. Before I start painting, I'm gently lifting some of the pencil lines with a kneadable eraser. For the apple, I'm starting with Hansa Yellow Light and Pyrrol Scarlet. First, I wet the entire apple with clean water. I'm using a size 8 round brush here. I start by adding yellow mainly to the left side of the apple, with just a little extending toward the right. Near the bottom, I'm also dropping in a small amount of olive green. Then I start adding Pyrrol Scarlet around the outer edges. While everything is still wet, the colors can gently blend into each other and create those soft transitions. For some of the shadow areas, I add a little permanent Alizarin crimson to my red mixture. This is only the first layer, so I'm keeping the colors quite diluted. We can always build more depth with additional layers later. Now I'll dry the painting before moving on. Next, I'm preparing some more olive green along with Undersea green and a little Pyrrolene green. I start by wetting the leaf with clean water. At this stage, I'm not trying to follow every little serrated edge. I wet mainly the center of the leaf and stop just before the outer edges. I add olive green through the middle. Then, using the tip of my brush and Undersea green, I start painting those serrated edges. I add a little perylene green along some of the edges to create more contrast. I want the center of the leaf to stay fairly light, so I'm careful not to cover everything with darker green. We'll come back later and add the finer details. I paint the other two leaves in exactly the same way. You'll probably notice that I keep turning the painting as I work. I like to find the most comfortable angle for each area, and it also helps me keep my hand out of the camera view. That's why I usually don't tape my paper directly to the table. The paper may curl little when I dry it, but that doesn't really bother me. If you prefer to keep your paper flatter, you can tape it to a piece of cardboard or use a watercolor paper block where the paper is glued from the side. I often save the sturdy cardboard backing from an empty watercolor pad or block and reuse that. Now I'm adding burnt sienna and burnt umber to my palette. I start with fairly diluted burnt sienna. I'm not going to paint the entire branch at once. I want to add some darker colors wet on wet, and if I painted the whole branch first, parts of it would probably dry before I got back to them. So I prefer to work in smaller sections. While the burnt sienna is still damp, I drop some burnt umber along the edges and into a few shadow areas. For the darkest accents, I add a little sepia here and there. I don't want to make the entire branch dark. Leaving some lighter areas gives it more dimension and makes the surface look more natural. I also paint the small brown calyx at the bottom of the apple. Then I dry everything again. Next, I'm going to define the indentations at the top and bottom of the apple. I'm using a mixture of Pyrrol Scarlet and permanent Alizarin Crimson. After placing the darker color, I soften the outer edges so the shadow gradually disappears into the apple instead of leaving a hard line. For the deepest part of the shadow, I add a little neutral tint to the same mixture. Then I repeat the same idea at the bottom of the apple. Now I'm coming back to the leaves. I want the main vein to look slightly raised rather than simply drawing a line down the middle. So I paint a light green shadow along one side of the vein and soften the outer edge with a damp brush. Then I do the same on the other side. By leaving that narrow lighter area in the middle, we create the impression of a highlight on a raised leaf vein. I repeat this on the other leaves as well. Then I dry the painting again. Now that everything is dry, I can see that the apple still looks a little pale. So I'm going to add another layer of color using wet on wet. So I have wet the apple again with clean water. This time, I'm trying to avoid the yellow area as much as possible because I want to keep that beautiful warm glow. I add more red over the apple and use my deeper red mixture with a little neutral tint toward the darker edges and shadow areas. If some of the red spreads too far into the yellow, I can gently lift it with a clean piece of paper towel. This lighter area also acts as the highlight on the apple, so I especially want to preserve it. Now I'm switching to my rigger brush. I deepen the shadow alongside the main veins and add the smaller leaf veins with very light, delicate strokes. I don't need to paint every single vein. Just a few are enough to suggest the texture of the leaf. For the final layer on the apple, I'm glazing with Pyrrol Scarlet using wet on dry. I apply the color where I want more intensity and then soften the edge with a clean, damp brush. To do that, I rinse my brush and remove most of the excess water on a paper towel or cloth before gently blending the edge. Thank you so much for painting with me today. You'll find the printable outline and the full materials list in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this watercolor apple, and I'll see you in the next video.